Recovery Church. I'm Pastor Uni, and I'm the Senior Recovery Pastor here. Super excited that you've chosen to join us today. Let's get started with a couple of announcements. The first one, join us right after service at 7:15 on Zoom. We have what we call the after church party. It's where we get together and we digest what we've just learned, what we've talked about, so that we can get to the nitty-gritty stuff of how it relates to our lives, to our recovery, to our communities, etc. And we get to learn practical ways to walk out what we've learned. Our second announcement, join us on Wednesdays. You can join us at 6 p.m. on Zoom, and what we have going on is a Bible study. We're learning about Revelation. So for the after church party and for the Wednesday Bible study, you can find the Zoom ID number in our comment section. So the next thing that we've got going on with our services, after this we're going to have worship, we're going to have an offering. So make sure that you give online for that. Then we're going to move into a time of scripture reading. We've got a scripture that we've got planned for the entire month. And that's because we're learning about forgiveness for this whole month. So we've got a scripture that you'll hear. And then we will move into a time of worship. And after that, I've got a surprise for you. Stay tuned to find out.
Matthew 5, verses 23 and 24 from the New International Version. Therefore, if you are offering your gift at the altar, and there remember that your brother or sister has something against you, leave your gift there in front of the altar. First go and be reconciled to them, then come and offer your gift.
I was buried beneath my shame. Who could carry that kind of weight? It was my tomb till I met you. I was breathing but not alive. All my failures I tried to hide. It was my tomb till I met you. You called my name and I ran out of that grave, out of the darkness into your glorious day. You called my name and I ran out of that grave, out of the darkness into your glorious day. Now your mercy has saved my soul. Now your freedom is all that I know. The old made new. Jesus, when I met you, you called my name and I ran out of that grave, out of the darkness into your glorious day. You called my name and I ran out of that grave, out of the darkness into your glorious day. I needed rescue, my sin was heavy, but chains break at the weight of your glory. I needed shelter, I was an orphan, now you call me a citizen of heaven. When I was broken, you were my healing, now your love is the air that I'm breathing. I sing. Oh, your love is strong. 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 Close enough to hold me near when fear is crippling. Safe enough to be my home when my world is crumbling. 'Cause I've come to know love stronger than the grave, that in my darkest hour raise me up from dead to life now, in resurrection power. Oh, your love is strong. 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 Your love vanquished all my enemies and broke the cage that silenced me. Set this armor free. I sing for all the love you've given me. Rejoice because you've chosen me and called this orphan home. Oh, your love is strong. 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 It's the hardest thing to give away, and the last thing on your mind today. It always goes to those who don't deserve. It's the opposite of how you feel when the pain they cause is just too real. It takes everything you have to say the word forgiveness. Forgiveness. It flies in the face of all your pride. It moves away the mad inside. It's always anger's own worst enemy. Even when the jury and the judge say you got a right to hold a grudge, it's the whisper in your ear saying set it free. Forgiveness. 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 Show me how to love the unlovable. Show me how to reach the unreachable. Help me now to do the impossible. Forgiveness. It'll clear the bitterness away. It could even set a prisoner free. There is no end to what its power can do. So let it go and be amazed by what you see through eyes of grace. The prisoner that it really frees is you. Forgiveness. 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 Show me how to love the unlovable. Show me how to reach the unreachable. Help me now to do the impossible. Forgiveness, I want to finally set it free. Show me how to see what your mercy sees. Help me now to give what you gave to me. Forgiveness, forgiveness.
All right. Welcome, everybody, to Raven Book Recovery Church. I'm Pastor Uni, and we've got a special guest today. So this is Pastor Jamin Bradley. Most of you that have been following us, you know this guy. He's been around quite a bit. So today, instead of preaching, I wanted to talk about forgiveness. That's our topic for the entire month of January. We've got the spiritual principle of forgiveness, which goes with step 9. Now, step 9 tells us to make a direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today, because Jamin and I, we've been friends for how long would you say, Jamin?
Oh, when did you start going to 1208? Like 2014?
I don't math.
I guess
Probably.
like
That sounds about right.
6 years, probably.
Yeah, that sounds about right. That sounds about right. With that, with friendship, sometimes there comes times when, friends have falling outs and things don't go expected to, the way that we expected them to go, which was the case with us. So that's why I wanted to actually talk with Jamin today, was because, we've got a lot to share about how forgiveness has impacted our lives and our relationship. And so I want to start off with, so about 2 years ago, Jamin and I, we had a falling out, and during that time, though, something interesting began to happen, and I didn't know that this was Jamin at the time, but we had like a serious falling out, and I started to receive these gifts, and that was like the coolest thing I'd ever seen in my life. They were anonymous, so I didn't know who was sending these gifts every week, but every week I would get something cool, like I got a Amazon gift card. I think one time I got Starbucks. That was like amazing. Another time I got soap. Oh my gosh, Bath and Body Works soap. Can't beat that. That's amazing. And then finally I ended up with a picture, which I wasn't able to actually grab the picture. I wanted to grab it to show you guys, but it was a picture of me and him. And so Jamin had been sending me all of these gifts during this time when we had this falling out, but I didn't know it was him. Would you talk a little bit about that? Talk about the gift process. What was that? Where did that come from? Just share about it.
Yeah. I mean, when I was writing my first book, Taste of Jesus, I spent a lot of time on the Sermon on the Mount and the backwards ways that Jesus told people to act. And I remember we were having this like falling out, and I was just sitting on my front porch on the stairs, just like miserable, unable to like think of what to do next and how to repair our relationship. And I had basically just completely given up at that point, and I think there was like nothing left, and I was just about to go inside when suddenly all that I had written about came to me as like, now you have to do it, Jamin. I was like, no, I give up. So I was like, okay, all right, maybe we try Jesus's stuff out and see where it goes from there. So it was just the kind of blessing those who you feel like are persecuting you, whether you were or not. It's just like that's where my head was. It's like, okay. So I think I decided that I would just send you gifts every day. And like, if I'm going to be honest with myself, like I wasn't like happy about it at first, until I saw on Facebook your responses of someone just gave me this, and I was like, oh, she likes me when she doesn't know it's me, you know. It's like and there was probably, this is me just being honest, trying the
Yeah.
experiment. Like there's part of me is like, oh, wait till she finds out. And then there's this other part is like, maybe this isn't.
Cliffhanger.
Yeah, then there's the other part of maybe this isn't so bad. Maybe we can fix this. Or maybe once she knows it's me, it will be okay. Because the end game was at the end was to give a present. And I went through probably a lot of there were some moments in there that were very Jesus minded, and then if I'm honest, there were moments where it was like fleshly minded, where it's
Yeah.
just like I think we even kind of had a argument at the end where my flesh side came out, where it was like those were supposed to help you like change your mind or turn it around or whatever.
You're supposed to be changed. What are you doing?
And like when I said that, I was like, dang it, Jamin, that wasn't the intent of why you did this, like you just bless, there's always the hope that it will help, but
Yeah.
even there it became more about me again rather than, so that was kind of, I guess that was the background behind it. I had completely given up trying to restore the relationship at that point, and then that idea popped in my head and was like, okay. And the next week was kind of a whirlwind of weird emotions back and forth, so
Yeah. No, definitely. I think what's amazing about that was I loved them in the minute, obviously, because I detailed my whole life on Facebook. Like, look at this picture, look at this gift, look at this. I don't know who this is, but I'm so excited. So like everyone got to see this journey, but internally, what really struck me was afterwards. It was after I knew it was you. It was after and here's the thing though, let's make it clear, like that didn't like magically make everything better, right?
Yeah.
But later, I think later what was amazing was, like now and over the past, I don't know, probably 5 months, I've been able to really just digest in my brain what happened. And that was beautiful because I was in a really dark place. Like I was in a really dark place during that time. I was really struggling with a lot of things, and not just, our relationship, but I had other issues in relationships that were just not where they were supposed to be. And internally, I felt like giving up. Like I was just like, what is this? Why am I here? What is the point of this? I feel alone, I felt very lonely. And so going back and seeing that, it was like those were little threads of life that like kept me holding on each week. And you didn't know, even though, you had the intention of it helping to heal our relationship, but what it actually ended up doing was it ended up helping to heal me clearly, like all around, not just our relationship. And so like I remember looking at those gifts, and one of the picture that you sent, that you put in a frame, it's at my mom's house. That's weird, but it's at her house.
It's you and me wearing the same shirt, right?
Yes, it's us.
We ran into each other at Meyer.
Yeah, we ran into Meyer at a random time, and yeah, we took a picture. And so that picture is at my mom's house, and it's sitting on her little TV stand. And it's kind of weird, but in a lot of ways, my mom's house is a safe place for me. And so when I walk in there, and even though I see that there, it's like it fits because that's a safe atmosphere. And those gifts and the way that you did that, it created, like, it made me feel safe inside. Like, okay, you can be honest, you can be vulnerable, you can, just be real. And that's where I think where our relationship started to change was we both acknowledged, okay, we can't fix all of this at once. It's a little bit too much. Maybe we need to take a little bit time apart and, as friends, and just kind of do life and in the prayer. And we both believe that God would, honor that. I have never though experienced giving gifts like that or receiving gifts. Have you ever done that before? Was this like the first time you've ever like?
I've given gifts, but probably never to someone who I was so, at odds with at the time.
Yeah.
And it was nice, because on that final day, I'm like, okay, she's gonna see the picture. She's either going to hate me, like this was you the whole time, or she's maybe this will fix it. She'll see that I do care about her. Because that was one thing that changed, and I found this in the past with other people. When you pray for people that you are at odds with, I think part of the reason God wants you to pray for your enemies is because it warms you up to your enemies. And giving gifts to your enemies is like that on crack. It's just like, okay, I'm not just like saying empty prayers. I'm putting my money where my
Where your
actions.
mouth is. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna keep investing into this. And so it warmed me up to you, even though you didn't know what was going on. And it was nice because at the end it did fix it for a minute.
A minute.
and then I know basically the same kind of debates that we had going on before, which a lot of it was just like a lot of our ministerial roles overlapped to the point that is because you're called to the same thing that I'm called to some extent.
Yeah.
And
But trying to cipher through that though,
yeah,
that's confusing, because I was just starting to realize, I guess not realize, but accept the weight of that calling. And it's like, I don't know what to do with this. I don't know what are you leading me to do, God? I don't know what to do with this. What am I supposed to do with this?
yeah,
It's like God gives you something and he's like, here you go. And then you're like, can I get an instruction manual?
yeah,
Like,
yeah. And you might disagree. I'm just people are easily wondering, what do they do? What do they fight about? And a
right.
lot of it was just like, we have similar identities and ministerial calling, and they
Yeah.
were butting heads
And I was
against
your
each other.
associate pastor. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
And so that that that's even a biblical problem to some extent. Paul and Barnabas are doing ministry, and then they start arguing about in Acts, what was it, Acts 15, they start arguing about how to go about ministry, and it's such a sharp disagreement that after all these chapters of the two working together in Acts, they're parted and they're like done with each other, because their giftings are similar. I'm not saying it's right. I'm just saying like
Right.
there's a biblical example of this having happened before. And so I think, it repaired it momentarily, but then over time our same problem grew again, really in a matter of weeks, if I remember right. And then it was kind of back at it again. So for anyone wondering more on the details, that's the central gist of it, if I remember right. So.
Basically, I was his assistant and his associate pastor, and I kept trying to do his job while trying to do my job because I didn't know what my job was supposed to be because God was telling me to do something, and I'm like, what am I supposed to do with this?
We also weren't super clear as to what your job was as an organization. Yeah. So there's more to it than that.
Yeah. That's fair. So with this situation, so with that, it seems like forgiveness wasn't linear in our situation. When I was looking back at it, it wasn't just straight. It wasn't a straight arrow. It was like it took some detours, it took some curves and some turns. And so like I guess one of the biggest questions that people have when they talk about forgiveness is, does forgiveness always have to end in reconciliation? Now, with some of the things that you've written about, some of the things that you've preached about, I was wondering what your take is on that. Like with our situation, it did end up in reconciliation, but is that always the case? What does that look like?
Yeah, I mean, you probably have a better opinion on this than I do, since recovery is your forte. From what I've seen in the Bible, reconciliation is like the hopeful extreme of forgiveness, but not the promised outcome of forgiveness. Forgiveness to me seems to be you owe someone a debt, and rather than force you to pay up for it, they release you from the debt. Just like a bank would say, you owe us 10 grand, but this year we're relieving you of that. Or, the government does this with student loans. Sometimes they forgive you the loan, and that's essentially what it is. Like, I hurt Maisha, I now owe a spiritual debt to Maisha. She has the power to release me from that. And if she does, I am therefore forgiven. The the hopeful Jesus extreme that Jesus is always hoping for is that we would be able to then reconcile after, to be a testimony of the love of God, and how extreme he can be, which I think for us we've hit more of that, and that's a lot because of you. I mean, we had fixed a lot eventually, but you had a service where I was helping with worship, and you wash people's feet, and you like made me come over. You're like, I'm gonna wash your feet, and like for me that was the final like release of everything. It was, first off, don't touch my feet, but secondly, like, this is such an extreme way of reconciling. And what I've learned, at least with reconciliation, is like forgiveness requires one person, but reconciliation requires two.
Yep.
And you cannot force someone to reconcile. They have to make that decision. And so I have relationships in my life where I've eventually just had to say, like, I forgive it, I'm open to reconciliation, but I know that other party is so harsh or stubborn against me, they're never going to come around, or it will be such a miracle that like I just need to remain open for it should the day ever come, and perhaps send gifts. I don't know.
Yeah, no, that's great stuff. It definitely takes two with that. And I think in talking about step 9, which, is the making direct amends whenever possible, except if it would do harm to you or someone else. I think that is probably one of the reasons people are so afraid of step 9 in the recovery field, is because they don't know if this is going to end in reconciliation, and they don't know the difference between I can forgive. That doesn't mean I have to, I don't have to be the only, well, I can forgive, but reconciliation comes from two people. I think within the recovery field, though, people don't see it that way. They think if I make amends with someone, then everything is supposed to be honky dory, and we're supposed to be, put back to normal, or what have you. But that's not always the reality of it. And I think that discourages a lot of people, though. It discourages them to even try, because they feel like, well, I can't do anything about this, so why even try to make things right? And so they just abandon hope in those relationships. And in all fairness, like I had abandoned hope. Like I was broken. I was so broken. I cried almost every single day, and I prayed almost every single day, like, God, help me, what is wrong with me? Like, my something's wrong. Like, there's something internally that is causing me to reject that picture of forgiveness, because that's what was happening after I received all the gifts. And I looked at all of it and I was like, yay, this is great. And I felt great. And then when I did find out it was you, I was like, what's the catch?
And that's where I'm honest too. In my mind, the fleshly part of me still wanted to put a catch into it. So
Right.
I'm not perfect in this example at all.
No, that's what makes this a great example, because we were able to find ourselves at a place of reconciliation. But I think the key for us was that we didn't rush it. We didn't rush it. I've seen a lot of people that I know, and hearing their stories. A lot of times reconciliation can't take place, not because the other person isn't willing, but because one person tries to move faster than the other person is ready. So like giving the gifts, that was great. But like I think about like a story, a friend of mine, she's like, she gave gifts. She did an anonymous thing, and there still was no reconciliation like years later. And I'm like, well, why? I'm like, why wasn't there a reconciliation? What went wrong? And she's like, I pushed them too hard, too fast, even through the gift giving. It's like, I wanted this now. I wanted the reconciliation to happen now. It's like, I made my amends. I said, I'm sorry. Now, this is what I want. I want this to be now. And I think that when looking at God's timing of everything, it usually doesn't go with our timing. You know, I think God uses these situations to work out for our good. And I know that both of us have grown a lot individually since this whole movement, since this whole thing has happened. We've, you know, but I definitely see the difference between reconciliation being just two people versus forgiveness. Because that was actually one of my other questions I was going to have for you, is what did you think the main difference was between reconciliation and forgiveness? Are there any other stories in your life that you can think of where there was a time of reconciliation or a time of forgiveness that led to reconciliation? And how did that look differently than this situation with us?
Yeah. Well, just to hop back one statement, just Paul's words in Romans also come to mind of the as far as it. Well, let me just get Romans 12. As far as it depends on you, if it is possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. And
Mm.
that's again that statement of like reconciliation. Of course, is the hope, but you can only take care of yourself.
Yeah, like forgiveness
Um,
is internal.
mhm. Yeah, so it's always back on you. Yeah, I think of times when there have been other people where we've had falling outs, and unfortunately, you were on like this has been a little bit of a cycle in my life, so there might be something wrong with me. I don't know, but because you had fallen into something I'd been through a few times, my heart was probably more hardened than would have been had it been the first time. One of the things I found difficult in the past was I once I would try to reconcile so much with one person that when I always came to the table, I always apologized for what I had done. We'd be mad, and I would show up and I would say sorry, and then they wouldn't
Respond.
apologize back. No, they'd accept it almost like it was ammo to hold over me because they would never
Oh,
respond on their part. And
okay.
so I was like, okay, all right, well, that's fine. And then it would continue to happen over and over again to the point that I realized it was only ever me showing up to the table and apologizing. It was almost like strengthening just Jamin's always wrong is the way that
Mhm.
it always seemed to come across. I'm like, I know like I'm wrong, but like it takes two to
Always.
argue. And every single time I'm wrong, so eventually that became like that that made it harder for me to like apologize consistently because I had in some ways been abused by that in the past. And so that honestly, that's one relationship that still hasn't been reconciled, and I've tried. I've reached out before, but there's a good chance that I can only leave my hands open to say I'm available. But it kind of feels like if I were to keep pressing, that it would be that doing damage to another person thing.
It's that want to do
Uh,
harm, yeah.
yeah, and I know that sounds weird. How can it be bad to like try to reconcile? But like the offer has been put out, I think, a few times, and eventually I might just have poked too hard to like explode it into a new problem if I were to keep
That's
doing it.
exactly
Maybe
what I
I'm
was
wrong.
just describing. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's exactly what I was just describing. This idea of wanting to reconcile so bad that, you push too hard for it and then everything implodes or nothing happens at all.
Mhm.
And I've seen that. I'm actually the pusher. I'm the pusher too hard.
Mhm.
I grew up as an only child. Even though I had other siblings by my biological father, I still grew up as the only child. My mom only had me. And um and so with that being said, though, I was also the only I was in a weird generational pocket in my family. So like I was the only kid that was around, period. Like when I was growing up, all my mom's cousins who were her age, who you would think they would have kids, they didn't have kids yet. And so I was the only one. And so in doing so, that kind of made me a little bit spoiled, and it gave me this mentality, like whatever it is that I want, I have this instant gratification, so I want it now. And and almost an entitlement too. And so those are some of the defects that I have inside of me, where even when it comes to forgiveness, I'm like, I want what I want now. It's like, I want it now. I'm going to push at it now. Just going to keep poking until eventually maybe they'll love me. Like, that's my brokenness, that still is there, through my childhood, coming through even into those situations. And so I don't handle that the best way. I'm working on it. I'm trying to learn through it. I'm in therapy, like, so I talk a lot about my childhood and the way that it manifests itself in my adulthood, and at how, like, even looking at forgiveness, it's like something so simple as forgiveness or making amends. I complicate it so much, or it's like, can you just try to love someone? And if you can't authentically love them because you're mad and you're in your feelings, can you just fake it till you make it? I think there's a lot of truth there in a weird kind of way, because I felt like, with your gifts, it was like you meant it, but it was also like, okay, all right, whatever I don't mean, it's like I'm just going to do this anyway, and hopefully this will make an impact. And so I could see the overlap with me in that as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'm the same way with Jody. If we get into a fight, I need to fix it immediately, this moment, right now. Whereas she needs to think and she needs a minute to get away. And if I push in that moment, there will eventually be an explosion between both of us with our not inability to reconcile, but the pace at which we reconcile. Where mine is the same as you, is like, let's do this right now. Jesus said quick, like Jesus said forgive people quick and do it quickly. Let's do it. And for her, she needs a moment to, like, quick is not right now, this second. Give me a second to go think, and then we'll come back and talk. So, and I think we can do that, especially in harder situations where we're trying to reconcile an immense amount of weight. It can become explosive when we are pushing for here right now. And it can be selfish sometimes too, because let's face it, there's a huge weight that comes off our back when reconciliation happens. And so there is a certain amount of, like, do this for me. There's actually, I will never fully understand this moment. You texted me at one point, I think it was right after the presence or something, I don't know, or maybe it was out of the blue, I don't know, but you wrote in there, my cat keeps hitting the microphone, get out of here, I'll reconcile with you later. When I read through the text, like, I was feeling good, but when I got to the end and you said, like, the word sorry for something, like, there was a literal weight, felt like claws on my shoulders, like, lifted out and fell off of me, and I had no idea I was carrying this. Like, the moment it happened, like, I was like, what on earth was that? It's like, like there was that moment of reconciliation almost seemed to do something in the spiritual for me, and that was it's all the more reason, like, we hope for reconciliation. We hope for the ability to be able to treat each other like human again, rather than stay where we're at. But we're only able to do what we're able to do. So
yeah, that's good stuff, actually, because what it kind of reminds me of, this idea of maybe, unforgiveness carrying this weight, right? And so, like, I think back to Jesus about, laying all our cares on him, and him lifting our burdens. And maybe at that moment, maybe that was, God using that reconciliation to actually lift. That's why you could feel it, because it was like that weight lifted, like he took that weight in that minute, even though it was us that was reconciling. And I love that, because I know the heaviness of that. I know the heaviness of that, especially, like, even if you ignore everything else that we're saying, even just the fact that we're both believers, like, we're both believers. And that's like one of the that's literally the top command, love one another. So like as believers, how even more like important is it to pursue this forgiveness? Like, I mean, even if we get rid of reconciliation in itself, but pursue forgiveness, like I remember what text you're talking about. Because what I'm saying is that like I wrote that text in a heart of pursuing forgiveness. And that's why when you mentioned in the beginning how you turn it inward, that's what helped me process this. Was I kept turning inward. What am I doing? Where am I at? What are my feelings? What am I holding on to? Your cat is scratching your leg, probably. Like,
She is. Whenever I have a microphone on, she's like, "Now I'm here to bother you. What do you want?" So
the way you twitched,
sorry.
though, you were like,
Trying to get her to go away.
but yeah, but no, so that's what that reminds me of. And it reminds me of Jesus, like I said, talking about lifting our burdens. And I think as us being believers, I think that when we're talking about forgiveness and versus unforgiveness, that's him lifting our burdens to get us to that place. Yeah, since then, I've had to work through quite a bit of forgiveness since then, and I'm glad that I can look back on how we did that, because it helped shape the way that I pursue forgiveness, or making amends with other people in my lives. Recently I lost a really good friend of mine. They basically told me that they don't think that the way that I'm pursuing social justice, they don't think it's biblical. So they told me that I'm not biblical, which is like a stab for any preacher, right? Someone tells you you're not biblical, that's like the offense of all offenses, right? And so they're like, A, you're not biblical. B, I thought I was fine with, working with you because you were a woman. That's not a big deal. But like, he had trauma due to his past and his ex-wife, and so now he's at a place where he's like, meh, like I don't even want to deal with women in leadership, so goodbye to you. So I had like this stab. It was like a Barnabas and Paul moment again, except it was like, okay, what did I do? Like, what did I do to get to this point? And how can I reconcile this? It took us about 4 months. And finally, the last thing that I did was I just listened. I just listened, because sometimes it's not our fault. Sometimes it's not our fault. And I think as believers, we sometimes don't give ourselves that credit, where we're like, you know what? This actually probably isn't my fault this time. Because as believers, we want to fix things. We want to be reconciled. We want Christ to reign supreme. We want love. And so we're quick to just be like, okay, I'll take the brunt of all of it. I'll just bear it all, even if it wasn't my fault. And I found myself doing that at first. And that created a whole nother weight of heaviness, because I'm carrying the weight of something that wasn't mine to begin with. And so what I had to do was, in looking and pursuing forgiveness in this, I had to say, you know what? Even if we're not going to see eye to eye, even if, this might not be able to be fixed in the long run or even in the short run, I had to look at it and say, you know what? I'm just going to move on, and I'm going to have forgiveness in my heart for the harm that was done to me, and continue to ask God where I did drop the ball. And because he's going to show me, you know? And so I could walk in that freedom though. What are some other times when you had to do something like that?
I think 2020 was that for every pastor in many ways. Just the whirlwind of things that we had to get into
Oh,
required pastors to be prophetic. And you could either continue to have no falling outs by being silent, or you'd have a different kind of falling out by being silent. Or you could say something, lose people, and take on a Jesus stance of, in John, when Jesus loses dozens to hundreds, I don't remember, but like Jesus is like, you'll drink my blood and eat my body. And doesn't explain that that's communion.
Like, what?
Yeah. And it says that everybody left. And Jesus was like, like Jesus knew I didn't do anything wrong. And there is a different kind of rejection that pastors, if they're truly pursuing the prophetic, need to be willing to accept, because it would be wrong if we didn't. Jesus wasn't accepted everywhere he went from the day he was born. He couldn't even find an inn, and then they tried to kill him, and ultimately that's what happened by the end of it. He was rejected all over the place, but he never was. And then, just as a lesson to all of us, as they're killing him, he's like, I forgive you. It's like, was he reconciled with every person when he did that? No. I'm sure there's plenty who just drove the spike even further into his hand after that. But it's the example to be anyway. So, and I kind of already shared that story where I kept like apologizing but never received an apology back. I will like add to that. Usually when I made those apologies, I didn't feel like I had done anything wrong, but I knew on their side they thought I had.
Probably thought you did.
So
Yeah.
I was like, I'm gonna apologize even though I don't really feel like I need to. So the fact that I would always apologize for something I didn't really feel I had messed up and then not receive anything in return, that was
Yeah.
a moment where I was like, okay, this is where I need to figure out like what is safe within trying to create reconciliation, because I've created a lot of ammunition of apologies that have now kind of turned against me, as I'm always the wrong one messing up, and them not taking any credit on their side for their mistakes, so yeah, occasionally I would run into those difficulties. I think, as I mentioned, in 2020, there's people who leave, and it's because of the things that we talk about. And there has been a different kind of weight on me when it's that, where, like you said, like I'm trying to process. I don't think I did anything wrong by being a woman. It's like, I don't think I did anything wrong by preaching about social justice. So why it would almost be wrong of me to apologize for such things.
Yeah.
So you then find yourself in this new space of what do I do now? Is it just the accepting what Jesus did? Sometimes people leave over things and it's not your fault, or is it like, where's that middle line I can cross that will help me reach out to them to start the conversation of forgiveness and reconciliation, even if it's not fully my fault in the first place. So yeah, I don't know. I don't always have an answer. I think one of the mistakes people make is they think that forgiveness and reconciliation equal ignorance and stupidity. Like when you
Right.
have a falling out with someone, you learn things, you learn about triggers, you learn about problems. Let's say someone is molested, right? Like you might get the amazing amount of Jesus strength to forgive and to reconcile, but that doesn't mean that you're alone around this person or that you leave the
Right.
space for it to happen again. That's not what reconciliation
Right.
is. It's not, this never
And it
happened,
doesn't
and
mean that you're
therefore,
glorifying it or thinking it's okay either.
yeah,
Right.
yeah. Reconciliation or forgiveness isn't forgetting, and I hate that we have that expression, forgive and forget. It's like, well, you're supposed to get to the point where you, I think N.T. Wright says this, you need to get to the point where you live as though it didn't happen. Like it's not like this weight on you, like still against them, but you don't forget that it happened. So, and maybe that's not applicable to every last situation, but
It's applicable to a lot.
yeah,
It's
forgetting is idiocy to some extent. Then you wouldn't be able to reconcile, because you wouldn't keep in mind what happened last time. Like you trigger it all over again. So
Oh no, definitely. I think in talking about making amends, I think that's why it, in step 9 it specifically said except when to do harm, because in situations like that and dealing with traumatic experiences, things, harms that have been done to a person sexually, physically, whatever, even emotionally. um, I definitely think that there is a difference between forgiveness, and whoever said you have to forget it, I call bullcrap. Because like you don't do that in the corporate world, right? Like if someone embezzles money from a company, you don't say, "Oh, we forgive you, but here you go. You can still have our credit card." Like, no, you don't, right? You remove the credit card, and then you work towards a reconciliation between parties, whether that means legal action or not, whatever. But the point is that you don't just forget about it and act like it didn't happen, in order to try to pursue a false reconciliation. Because I think some people pursue false reconciliations where they just go through the motions so that they think that it'll make them feel better, or it's what people tell them. But in reality, like, nothing has been changed between the two people. You
Yep.
know, they're still doing the same crap that they were doing before, hurting people in the same way. And so, how do you forgive something like that? I think I obviously we go back to our Jesus example, right? On the cross. I mean, I can't think of a better example. I mean, he's being murdered. Like, he's being murdered, and yet his response is, "Father, forgive them." He didn't say, "Reconcile me to them," even though later, we preach reconciliation, but on the cross, he didn't say, "Reconcile me to them." He said, "Forgive them," because they don't know what they're doing. And I think for me, I have to keep that in my memory, in my mind, as I'm trying to pursue forgiveness and reconciliation with others throughout my life. I have to keep in mind, what, maybe I need to pray that prayer for myself. you know Father, forgive me because I honestly don't know what I did wrong, or Father, forgive them because I know what they did, but they don't want to accept that, and so help me to move through that. I liked your example, your definition of forgiveness that you said earlier. It's like not holding on to that debt, right? Erasing a debt. It's like, you owe me a debt because you wronged me. Well, I'm going to lord this over your head and be like, nah, 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 nah. You owe me this. Whereas in forgiveness, it's like, how do we remove that debt while still, being true to what's happening? I don't have like all the answers for forgiveness. I really don't. Um, I've learned a lot though. I've learned a lot throughout this past year. Being a pastor during a pandemic. Oh my gosh. It's like, what do you do with that? It's like no one is in their, like, honestly, no one's in their right mind, because none of us have ever been through a pandemic. None of us know what to do with this. We don't know how to lead through forgiveness during a time when we don't even know the certainty of what's going to happen next in our congregations and in our communities. And sometimes forgiveness is like the last thought that we have, to be honest, during a pandemic, because some of us are just trying to make it through it, right? So what are some other key things you think that, as we wrap up, key things that you think people should know about our situation, key points that you want people to know about what you've learned about forgiveness, and then plug in some of your work, because you are the busiest pastor, the most hardworking pastor I know. We'll say it that way. Not busy, but hardworking. Like, you're constantly producing material, like all the time, like more than anyone else. So plug that in at the end.
Well, thanks. Um, yeah, I guess when I just think of the overarching theme of just everything we went through, there was just there was little moments of butting heads that eventually grew into big moments of butting heads that eventually grew into completely hardened hearts against each other, where we couldn't work together anymore. And these moments of gifts trying to repair if possible, a little bit of repairing, and then falling apart again. And eventually for us, the most reasonable thing that we felt we could do in ministry, as well as our own narratives, was to, as God had already put on your heart, to start a recovery church. We, as a church, without everyone knowing what was going on except for the board, we tried to make it look and feel like a sending party, that Maisha's heading to do some more ministry as God's calling her to do this. And I think I was the one who compelled the church to like give money towards what you guys were starting out, which was hard because again we were struggling again, but I just felt like this is the right thing to do. And then I was in charge more or less of putting together this celebration dinner church service for you,
Hmm.
which
Which
was
was amazing.
also a little hard because
Yeah, yeah,
I was like, this is another gift I'm giving you.
right,
Um,
right. And we hadn't reconciled. We hadn't,
no,
made things, so yeah,
because
that's
it
very
had
real.
reversed again by that point. So
Right. Yep, yep. It's
yeah,
like we've done some work and then it was like, yeah, there we hit another snag.
yeah. And
Yeah.
then I think as we both continued to do ministry, there's little the space helped, I think, and perhaps for we got sprinkled into helping each other. Occasionally, I'd show up and help with music and whatnot, and it was just I think the final, as I mentioned, the final like into everything for me at least was washing feet at your service. That was that text where you said sorry. The washing feet thing was like that, just blown up to the extreme. It was like, okay. And then I washed your feet after that. And then that was kind of like the moment of let's let this go. And I think there's, in some ways, like I now have to require myself to leave that behind. It's part of the story that happened and not dwell on it. Because I think there are moments where, like, you can, with any problem in your life, that if you go back and think through the story, you can get angry all over
Hmm.
again and
Yep.
forget the
There's
whole
still some
narrative
tender
by the
moments.
time it was done. Yeah, yeah. Actually, when you asked me to do this, I was like, okay, what would I say? And I start like thinking over how to tell a story. And part of me was like, man, that was, like,
Right.
I was
That
like,
really
I'm getting a
sucks.
little angry again. I was like, and I was like, no, 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 no. You're focusing on the wrong parts. You have to choose if you've really forgiven to leave this behind and
Yeah.
focus on the actual story as it is in its full picture, where you have the reconciliation in the end. So that that is a lot of, I think, our narrative. I love Maisha. I love what she's doing. I'm excited for God's call in her life and to see her thrive in what she is called to do. And I know that she would do it well wherever she goes. And I think the whole story just helps me keep in mind just how great she is at what she's doing, even because
Oh,
many of the problems that we had were because you were too good at what you were doing. It's
oh,
like,
wow.
part
Thanks.
of me was, I know part of me, this wasn't the primary reason. Part of the, we'd fight occasionally about like you wanted to teach, but teaching's like my favorite part
It's
of
part of it.
ministry.
Yeah.
And like part of me was jealous because whenever you preach, everyone's like amen in you and talking. I'm like, if she keeps preaching, no one will want to listen to me anymore. Like there's little elements of like, she's too good at this. She's going to take over. So those are the things we just have to be honest with ourselves if we're ever going to forgive and release and
Yeah.
make amends. So
I definitely agree with that, all of that, wholeheartedly. I'll just add this on the end. I think that also what was kind of like a recipe for, as you just described the whole, oh, she's too good at this, so like I feel, what am I going to do about that, I felt the same way, except I was often jealous of like of your lineage. And so like what I mean by that is like the things that are core to who you are, the fact that you've never taken a drink of alcohol in your entire life, like what is that? Like, I don't know anyone else ever. Like, I don't know anyone else. And so it's like things like that. And how, spending so much time with your family and seeing the way that you were raised in this, balanced Christian household, that I've never seen that before either, where it's been authentic. And so that would make me jealous a lot, as someone who's coming from the darkness into the light. It was like, oh my gosh, what is this? So I had to process what that looked like too. And so I think, I guess, summary, when we're dealing with hardened hearts, I think what made a difference between our situation and others is that our hardened heart equaled a lot of time on our knees with God. And I think that's the only way that we've been able to not just reconcile, but have been able to forgive and repair, and not just that, but come out even better, than before. Is because we took that and we spent that time on our knees with God and confessing that and lamenting over that and being real about the jealousy or the moments of frustration. And I think that some people don't want to do that with God because they don't want to go there. With God, they think God is just up here in the clouds, just kind of doing his own thing, but we can't be real with him about what we're struggling with. And I think that, you gave an example of what that looks like to walk through those frustrations while still holding on to God's sleeve, which makes an amazing interview like today.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell this story really quick. When I was fighting with someone once, like I I didn't even know what to do anymore. I was above my head, and I had a dream one night of a bunch of ants in my bathroom. Every time I'd stomp on them, they'd turn into more ants. And I'd stomp on those, they turned into more ants till they took over the whole bathroom. I just remember in the dream, I just yelled out, I don't know why, but I guess I was just beyond myself. I'm like, stop moving in the name of Jesus. And all the ants like stopped and then shrunk into a weed coming out of the crack in the tile. And that was it. And I woke up and I was still so angry at this person. Usually I'm pretty good at dream interpretation when it feels like it has one. But I was still so angry at this person, I couldn't see the interpretation. So I like told my wife and she just interpreted it immediately. And I was like, oh, yeah, that's pretty obvious, isn't it? It's just like I kept trying to take care of the problem with this person. I kept trying to like smash it out, stop it from happening. And every time I did, it turned into more and a bigger problem until finally I just handed it over to God. And then was it still a problem? Yeah. But it's much easier to take care of just pulling a weed out of the ground rather than ants taking over my house. And that just goes back to the holding on to the sleeve of God, as you mentioned. Like if we're going to do forgiveness or reconciliation at all, you got to take it to the person who's done it best already and ask for guidance. And out of that, I learned to pray for that person and pray that they would get everything that I wanted, um, which killed me, but also made me care more about them, to the point that when that relationship finally imploded, you could see in their eyes a lot of like anger and vengeance towards me. And you could probably see anger in me too, but well, you probably see a lot of anger in me still. But on my side, there was at least this clarity of like, you're misreading the situation, whereas their side was seeing a lot of lies that weren't there. And the only reason I had, I think, any clarity in that time, even in the midst of anger, was I've been praying about this. I've been going to God about this and asking him to try to take it. Because every time I tried, it just got worse and worse. So,
Yep. That's what I meant when I said earlier about me being so quick to just like act and want to do this and want to do that, and that impulsiveness, the right now type of thing. That's good stuff. So what have you been working on lately? Give us some plugs. Tell us some places we can get some of your materials and things you've been working on.
I'm trying to write a ancient romance novel, um, about the conception of the cosmology in the Bible.
Okay. Getting into some alien theology still.
No, it's just
This is different.
well, whenever people look at like old times in the Bible and talk about flat Earth, like oh, they thought it was flat. They thought it was a lot different than that. Like it's flat with a globe ceiling and waters above that, and stars are like moving around up there and that, and whatever the case was. I was like, how could I write a book about ancient cosmology that people would be interested in reading? Because that sounds like the most boring thing ever. So then I was writing just about this husband and wife within that.
Okay. All right.
I
What is
haven't touched that in so long. It's probably not going to go anywhere. But that was the
okay?
only thing I've.
Well, what is something you've completed lately
I don't know. The
that you want to
Grinch
put a
rap
plug in?
song.
The what?
Just the Grinch rap song is the only thing I completed lately, I
Going
guess.
back on the Christmas, the Grinch rap song. That was pretty good. That was good stuff.
Yeah. Well, at the start of the year, I did a book called God's Grand Framework because I was cheating. Since we were preaching online, I would
Uh-huh.
just write my scripts each week, which were chapters in a book. So my messages were ultimately going to end as a book. So I just two birds in one stone. That was the only thing that I did earlier this year.
Okay.
Probably the
Where can we
bigger thing
find
I
that?
did this
What
year.
is that
Amazon.
about and where can we find it? You said Amazon.
Yeah. I mean, I've got a book about Jesus. I've got a book about the Holy Spirit. This one felt like it was my book about God. So now I have a trinity of books at this point.
Nice.
Yeah.
All right. So you can look for those on Amazon, and you can also check out Jamin's Church at 1208greenwood.com, right?
Yep.
.com. All right. You can see all the great things that they're over there working on. So make sure you download some of his music too. What's the latest album you made?
I don't know. There's a lot up there. It's mostly singles and EPs at this point. So
Okay. Is it on the 1208 where
iTunes, Spotify, wherever. Just search Jamin
okay.
Bradley. Pops up.
All right. Sounds good. Well, thanks for joining me today. Thanks
Thanks
for
for
getting
having me.
into the awkwardness, but also the realness of it. So I'm super excited, and I will catch you soon.
Sounds good.
All right.